bought my first house in Oklahoma City. This was probably I'm guessing about 1,600 square foot house. And this was in 1970 that we bought it. And it cost the princely sum of $14,600. And we had to, in order to afford that, by the way, it was a 3-bedroom, 2-car garage house. And you can imagine what you can get now for $14,600. But we had to pay for that by doubling up our house payment the first year in order to be able to afford it on a Army captain's salary of 1970. It had gone up some from my PFC days, but still wasn't real high. Then I went to Fort Benning and went through the airborne course and then the advanced course. And the advanced course, that was held in Infantry Hall, and each class would normally consist of about 200 officers, 20 of which would be foreign. And we had officers from countries all over the world with us. This was also the time when Lieutenant Calley was going through the My Lai trials, and that was held at Fort Benning. And know exactly where he was held in confinement, which was in his own house, by the way. That was not a jail kind of confinement. And a lot of interesting times while there, but that was basically a relax and study kind of environment. When you go through advanced course, sometime about 2/3 of the way through or so, you will get visited by assignment people in the personnel section of your branch. And when they came down to see us in October, I asked the person that I was my branch contact, who was a major. I said, you know, being somewhat astute of the military, I said, after every major conflict, you tend to have a reduction in force. If that were to happen now, where would I be? And he went through my records in a fair amount of detail, and he said, you wouldn't have any problem whatsoever. In December, I received a letter from the, what they call the Department of the Army Board, saying that I was being reduced from the Army. So much for that. But in the meantime, I had submitted my reclama on that efficiency report I mentioned. Well, obviously I was not assigned to Ranger School because of that, and I was assigned to the Infantry Test Board at Fort Benning. I worked there for some people that I'd known previously as well. And then I was supposed to leave the Army on around the 1st of May. So I decided what I now needed to do was get my degree, because I didn't have one. And I applied at several places. And after a lot of scrutiny, I decided to attend the University of Texas at Arlington, in Arlington, Texas. And I went out there, found a house that I actually made a down payment on, did all the application stuff at the university, and they were ready to go. And the moving company was coming to pick up all our stuff, like on the 30th of April, or 29th or 30th of April. Well, the day before the moving company comes, I get a message saying that there's a notice for me, and I'd gotten a telegram, basically, or the Twix, as it was called back then, from Department of the Army Infantry Branch, saying that my reclama had been approved. And so and all pending actions should be changed. So I called back up to my contacts up there, and they said, yeah, you can now go on your assignment to, I think I was headed back up to Fort Carson. And I said, well, being realistic about this, is this all the rifts that's going to happen? They said, no, probably not. I said, well, where would I stand if another one came about? I said, well, you're probably at least a 50-50, but probably a better chance of staying in. I said, well, I put money down on the house. I've been accepted to college. I've sort of accepted this in my mind as to what I'm going to do. And also just had our second child, also a girl. And I said, how about if I just say I'm going? And they said, fine. So I left active duty in May of '72 and went to Arlington. Long story short, I'd taken a lot of end-of-course tests and courses at various places while I was on active duty. And I graduated in December '73 with a degree in business. While going through school, I'd found out that if I joined the Texas National Guard, I could get in-state tuition. And I did that, and I became part of the 71st Brigade, which later became the 36th Brigade, and that was the only airborne brigade in the Guard or Reserve structure. So I was now assigned to an airborne unit. My first jump after jump school, which is referred to as your cherry jump, was with the brigade, and I became company commander again of B Company. So I commanded 3 B companies, and we jumped on what's called a Muta 7, which are 3.5 days of being on active duty. And I jumped in Puerto Rico, where we flew from Dallas Naval Air Station in C-130s, and in fact they were A models, to Ramey Air Force Base that I'd flown from to go to Vietnam. And then we jumped the next day on the south side of Puerto Rico, and that was my cherry jump. And my battalion commander had been a little bit longer between his jumps, as his previous jump had been in combat in Korea, and this was his next jump. But I stayed with the Guard as commander there until I graduated from college in December '73, and I took a job at Owens Corning Fiberglass in Rhode Island. Up there I found a reserve unit to get into with 76th Brigade, or 76th Division, 3rd Brigade of 76th Division, and stayed there until the company transferred me to the Houston, Texas area. And I went down there. I was working on rotating shifts, so I did not immediately go back into the reserves until they sent me a nasty letter saying that they were going to board me out unless I participated. So I started, I got attached and later assigned to the 75th Maneuver Area Control. I also completed my Command and General Staff College that night. And the 75th Maneuver Area Command was a very different kind of unit. It was very officer heavy, and their mission was to go around and write and conduct various command post and field exercises for National Guard and Reserve units all over the western United States. And we would normally do that on a 3-day or 4-day deal, where we would fly out on Thursday morning or Friday morning and come back on Sunday night. So instead of having 2 weeks of active duty at one time, I had lots of 3-day sessions. And in fact, we normally went over our 15 days by quite a bit. But I did that from 1977 and left them in 1988. But while there, for various reasons, I ended up getting divorced from my wife, and we had 2 children at that point, 2 daughters. And I started dating someone else, and then she and I ended up splitting as well. And there was this one gal that I'd sort of had my eye on in the reserve unit for quite a while. And my oldest daughter was a junior in high school, and her high school was in a football playoff game, and they were going to play at the Astrodome, and I wanted to go see the game, so I thought maybe I ought to have a date. So I thought I'd ask this girl if she was still dating somebody, and I knew she had been dating someone fairly steadily. And so I asked her, and I said, "Are you still dating Frank?" And she says, "Oh, no, I'm not." I said, and that's all I said to her. And then I guess 2 nights later, I got up the nerve and I called her at home. And I said, "Debbie?" And she said, "Yes." "Who's this?" I said, "This is Ronnie Rondem." And at the time, Debbie was a second lieutenant, and I was a major. And she said, "Oh, hi, sir," was her answer. And I asked her if she was interested in a date. She said, "Well, aren't you married?" And I said, "No." She said, "Are you sure?" I said, "Yes. Would you like for me to bring my divorce decree along?" And she said, "No, that's okay." And she also knew that I used to smoke, and I used to smoke fairly heavily. And she asked me if I still smoked. I said, "No, I've quit for a year or 2, whatever it had been at that point." She said, "Okay." So she consented to going on a date, and be that as it may, she was also the daughter of the commanding general, Major General. And I ended up dating her and subsequently marrying her, and we have 1 child as well, a son. We both stayed in the 75th for a while. Because we drilled on the same weekend, she thought it more appropriate if she'd find another unit to go to. And she found an opening in the Selective Service Detachment in Houston, which is basically the draft board system, a draft system. And she went to work for them on a part-time basis. She's a school teacher, school counselor by profession, and she did that also. So when we moved to Atlanta, when I transferred to Atlanta, I had to find a new unit for me to be assigned to in the reserves, and she took a position with the Selective Service System here in Atlanta as well. And she found a job teaching full-time, or actually a counselor in Forsyth County school system. And I got assigned, found a slot in the ForceCom Augmentation Unit as Lieutenant Colonel, and thought that would probably make for my 27 years and go home. And lo and behold, my commander was a full colonel, and he was selected to be a brigadier general designee. In other words, if he got activated, he would be a BG. And so that position became open. And about that same time, they held a colonel's board, and I was picked up for promotion to colonel, and ended up being selected to command the unit after him. So I became commander of the ForceCom Augmentation Unit. I was activated during Shield Desert Storm because the nature of the unit, all of my unit members went out to the various sections within the headquarters command, and the only person that didn't have a job to go to was the commander, me. Well, they found a job for me. I became the Deputy Director of Current Operations for ForceCom, which was a very interesting job during the Shield Desert Storm. And as part of that, I got to know some people better than I knew him before, such as General Max Baratz, that I previously met through my father-in-law. And now he was the Deputy Commander for Reserve Affairs for ForceCom, and I had to work quite closely with him in the activation. And when we finished our activation, when the conflict was completed, my deactivation ceremony was hosted by General Burba, the 4-star commander out there, which was a pretty big honor as far as I was concerned. And we're socializing thereafter, and General Bratz came up to me. He said, "Well, what do you want to do now, Ronnie?" He knew that I had a few years left. And I said, "Well, I really can't see drilling for another unit in the Atlanta area, because my wife drills on the first weekend of the month, and that's when every one of those units drill. So I don't know if there's another unit that I can find that I can drill with. So what I'd like to do is find a individual mobilization augmentee position somewhere overseas. And he said, if you can find a vacant 06 position in the IMA structure overseas, and you can identify it, I'll make sure you get it. I said, sure. And I quickly went to work with some contacts that I had at FORSCOM to find out how to do that. And I ended up contacting the assignment officer at each one of the sinks, and there are 5 of them, including FORSCOM, to find out what they had. And I found one in SOUTHCOM in Panama. And in fact, I had recommendations from all sorts of people for that position. And I had to, in order to be accepted, you had to send a military bio in, and you had to talk with them on the phone a little bit at the interview kind of thing. And said, okay, they called me back and said, your order's on the way. And then they called me back the first day and said, forget that. The person who's in the job just extended. So I didn't get that, and I had to start all over again. Well, I ended up talking to the guy in Hawaii at the Sink Pack for the second time. And I said, are you sure you don't have any position? He said, oh, let me go through it again. And he goes through his book that he apparently had it in, and he found that he had one 06 position, but he said, you probably don't want this. I said, try me. And he said, this is Secretary General Staff at the United States Army Japan. I said, good, sold. I said, okay, give me your bio, etc. And I got him the bio, and I called Max, and the two met, and I got that job. And so for my last 3 years in the Army, I was the Secretary General Staff at Camp Sama, Japan, for 3 weeks each year, and had a thoroughly enjoyable assignment. We went over there. We worked hard when we were supposed to work, but we also got an opportunity to visit quite a bit. And I got to see a little bit of Japan. Found out that Tokyo is nowhere near as expensive as people think it is. Atlanta would be very expensive too if all you wanted to do would eat at the Morton's and Bones. Well, so is Tokyo. So I finished my military service in 1996. My actual retirement ceremony was held at the 75th Maneuver Area Command in Houston, Texas. And the person who retired me was promoted to Brigadier General in the same ceremony, where he then took over the formation and awarded me a retirement medal, and hence retired. Subsequent to that, I've not stayed in touch much on my side of the military, but my wife stayed in with selective service throughout, and she continued to go up in rank as well, and she also was selected for colonel. And she retired with 32-year service this past March 2007. 32 years, and my 34 plus years, and her dad's 36 years. So between the 3 of us, we have over 100 years, which I think is
amazing.
Pretty good deal. So
well, good.
So that sort of completes my military service and the some of the stories behind it and with it.
Well, that's good. It's been an interesting story. I want to take this opportunity to thank you for coming down, and also to thank you for your service.
Thank you.
So, any last comments or?
I've read a lot about Vietnam. I've read a lot about Iraq. I read a lot about World War II. While in Vietnam, I read, in fact, I read it a lot when I was out in the field. And my first tour had a pretty thick paperback that we got through the book system over there that had to do with Vietnam, basically from 1500 on, and why it is the way it was. I knew long before it got publicly declared that you could pretty well anoint Ho Chi Minh as a nationalist being a communist, and that therefore our chance of being the quote-unquote winners in Vietnam were not necessarily real good. That did not diminish my reason for serving. However, I tried to do it before and after I read that book as ethically and correctly as I could. I thoroughly enjoyed my military service. I got a whole bunch harder than I ever thought I would. I'm proud of having served and having been there. I don't think the same thing is happening in Iraq. I don't think it's nationalist. I do wonder that if at some point in time Iraq may not become three different countries, Kurdish, Shiite, and Sunni, but I think we're doing the right thing. I think if we've made a big mistake in Iraq, it has been not to follow the Powell doctrine of putting in the amount of force one should have when one goes into combat, which he orchestrated and did during Gulf War I, if you will. I'm a huge, great Powell fan. I met him in person and have some very interesting stories about General Powell. In fact, I'd like to add that when I was first coming into the Force Comm Augmentation Unit, I was out there doing some in-briefing, if you will, just reading manuals and stuff, SOPs, and I'm sitting in a little bitty cubicle. I had my Army Class B uniform on, and however, the Force Comm uniform of the day was BDUs, and he comes walking by in his BDUs, and taking a shortcut from the distance office to his, and he sees me sitting there, obviously out of uniform, and he stops and backs up a little bit, and I see the 4 stars and immediately stand up pretty straight, and he says, "You knew I was in here, aren't you?" I said, "Yes, sir." And he says, "I'm Colin Powell." And I said, "Sir, I'm Ronnie Rondem. Glad to meet you." And we talked for maybe 15 minutes, not about anything in particular, more about my background than anything else. The next time I saw him was at the Commerce Club downtown Atlanta. The military affairs group for the Atlanta Chamber of Commerce normally holds a hail and farewell for the commander at Force Comm. Well, General Powell had come in like March or April, and they had not held a hail party for him when his appointment to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs came through. So they held a combined hail and farewell. Excuse me. And I went down there for my civilian employer funded my attendance. And I came down there probably a little bit before 6, and it was supposed to start at 6 o'clock. And there were a couple of people in there, and I just sort of went over into the corner and just sort of stood there, not being anybody's way. And the next person in, probably 5 minutes after me, was General Powell with his wife Alma. And he comes up and greets a few people there and looks over in the corner, and I'm in a civilian coat and tie suit. And he looks over and is, "Hey, Ronnie, how you doing?" He remembered me by name, even though in different uniform. Came over, said hi to me. We talked again for a fair amount of time, and introduced me to his wife and talked quite a bit with her. And then he said, "Do you mind if I leave? Alma, would you? I need to do some proper socializing." I said, "Oh, not at all." So I got to know her quite a bit better and talk with her, and said goodbye to them that evening, and I enjoyed his company, etc. The next time I saw General Powell was after he retired, and that was at the Human Resources Conference, Society Human Resource Management Conference, in Minneapolis. And again, I was up there in civilian clothes completely. And in fact, I probably had retired by then. And he was up there as the keynote speaker. And he comes out on the podium and looks around. Doesn't say anything to me or anybody else that I saw, but just looks around at his audience and starts off his speech by saying that I see some people in the audience I know. Ronnie Rondem's over there. Again, hadn't seen him for I don't know how long. Talked to him twice in my life, and he remembered me by sight. And I was just tremendously impressed. Everything I've ever seen or heard about him directly, I wish he'd ran for president, but I knew he wasn't going to, because you know, he said that as much back when he was at Fort Scott, because he did not want to put his wife through anything like that. I think he probably did a wrong thing by accepting the Secretary of State's job, but be that as it may, he did it, and I thought he did as good a job as he could under the circumstances.
Okay, well, I think we need to close this now.
Yep.
And again, thanks for your participation.